Now, I'm originally from Bendigo, so that's hence my strong links back here, and I moved down to Rosebud in 2007 to take up a position as a station officer with the career staff fireys at Rosebud Fire Station, working alongside the volunteers. Very good station, very happy crews, a really great place to work, very interesting. I didn't include any photos of some of the jobs tonight that we do, but we cover a wide area of the lower half of the peninsula. We get to meet a lot of people, and we get to do a lot of work in a lot of different places. And just as a bonus, it just happened to be an amateur radio club right next door to the fire station. So, gee, that was terrible. And they had benefits, which we'll see down the track. In any case, will we go? Can we go to the?
Yep. Well,
go to the first. We'll go into the slides.
Okay.
And we'll use the pictures to kind of break up my talk a bit. I think that's probably the best way to go.
That one there.
Okay.
Right,
yeah, first one. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll go. We'll share the screen when this gets up.
Okay. So, okay.
And now we won't be sharing the screen yet. I'll just get this up. And
It's doing a bit of fiddling here.
all right.
And if I click on that right link, does that move the frame?
Hang on.
Okay. Just as a precursor, the Southern Peninsula Amateur Radio Club, or SPARC, and I'll rip into this.
Right. Can we all see the screen?
I'm getting nods.
Yeah, that's good.
Getting
Okay.
nods.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Now, we'll start with the location first of all. In case you don't know it, the Mornington Peninsula is a rather unique place, and it's located to the southeast of Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, in case you're listening from overseas. It's a long peninsula, and it's got a very strong range of landscapes, or a different range of landscapes. Lofty hills in the middle, beautiful views off to the ocean to the south, and you've got bay beaches on both sides to the east and west. So it's a unique place, and it's very, very well suited to amateur radio. SPARC itself was formed on the 4th of June 1979, and it has moved locations several times before now settling to its present location at the Vern Wright Reserve in Capel Sound. So it's no longer next to the fire station, but that's okay. We've done pretty well. SPARC was always an active club and was involved in a wide range of club activities and projects and community involvement. So relatively small membership, but very active and very, very focused and very keen. Like so many community organisations, what do I do to move that on?
Probably just
okay.
that.
We'll click that forward. Okay, we'll take a bit of viewing here. That little building you can see, there was the little fibro shack that sat next to the fire station with an area of green paddock between the two. Beautiful for doing antennas. Very secluded, back from the road. Fantastic place for a radio club. But the radio club itself, the building was very small, and the antennas we didn't really have what we would like to have had there, but it served the purpose. It also meant that when I moved down there in 2007, we were able to establish a good link between the fire station personnel, the volunteers, the staff, and the members of the radio club, which proved to be very beneficial to both. Now, one of the issues with SPARC at the time was like a lot of clubs, we operated close to the baseline. We didn't have a lot in financial reserve, so we tended to live hand to mouth, as is always the case with clubs, and there were fees to pay and things to do. So most of the work that we did was the normal community involvement, as you're familiar with, the various community events, school displays, talks, field days, but not a lot to really play with. So I'm looking at 2007 at the moment. I might click forward. I'll go back there. Just going to show you some of the scenery around the peninsula, so you can get a feel for where we live. This is out towards Flinders, one of the locations we chose. That's looking down towards the Southern Ocean. You can see at the top left-hand corner, that's the bottom of the end of the strip from Phillip Island, around the Nobbies. Oh, did I get that wrong?
On there,
sorry.
and just click on that.
There you go. So we're looking at some scenery. That's one of the bay beaches near Capel Sound, or as it used to be known as Rosebud West. Do I want to just push that?
Left mouse button.
Oh, left mouse button. Okay. That's around looking at a bay beach back towards Melbourne from Capel Sound, Rosebud West. As you can see, it's just a terrible place to live. It's just awful. That's Arthur's Seat in the background, looking towards the northeast, which where our current SPARC repeater is located, up amongst those towers. Over to the left-hand side, that's Mount Martha in the very far distance there. More bay scenes. And as you can see, the club's like any other club. This is putting up the tower at the old club rooms, putting the mast up, and the crew working hard there to get everything trued away. We were involved in, as I said, a number of local events. This was what was known as Neighbour Day, Capel Sound Neighbour Day, that we always got invited to. So we just went down as part of the community and set up a small radio station and a dipole and had some contacts, and were part of it. What's wrong? That's okay. No. Now, this little event here that we used to take part in, or still take part in, is the Kite Fest on the Rosebud foreshore, which is a stunningly big event. It's massive. We decided many years ago to get involved in that, and for no other reason than public exposure. But as it turned out, the organisers initially wanted us to have some link of relevance to kites. So we said, well, hey, we're going to fly a kite antenna. So they said, that's great. So Lino VK3 EI and a few of his mates brought their trailer-mounted radio station down from Blackburn. And he was a member of the club at that time. We set up and we ran some long wires and some kite antennas, and we had some terrific contacts. And we actually scored the record for being the highest flying kite that day, which was entirely unintentional, but it's just the way it panned out. And again, you can see some views here of the kites, and back towards, you can just see our pole in our dipole in the very background there. And again, and you can see Arthur's Seat on the right. I'm trying to get you a feel for the topography there and the kind of landscape that we've got. More kites, surprise, surprise, very busy event. And there's one of the ships going out towards the heads. Now, another activity we got involved in, a couple of us got involved with a local primary school called Eastbourne Primary, and they were looking to build an FM radio station for the kids so that they could have experience with public speaking and presenting. And but the problem was we had to comply with ACMA regulations, which meant we were limited to a total output power of, wait for it, 10 microwatts. So we found a company in Geelong that built a commercial transmitter, FM transmitter. It was tempting to go on eBay and buy one of the El Cheapo 5-watt things, but we didn't go down that track. We did it the proper way. High quality coax, good fittings, and I built up an antenna and put it on the roof. And we were able to cover the entire school grounds. In fact, we were getting up to nearly a kilometre range at one stage. It was a little bit interesting because a local lady took umbrage to the fact that we had a radio station, and she ran a campaign to stop it. She railed against the radio club, and she railed against the school, and she even had supporters. And after several months of very, very uncomfortable negotiations, she finally gave up when we convinced her that 10 microwatts was less power than she had in a handheld television transmitter. So that radio station is still operating to this day. I think it's on around about 99.5 megahertz. We've moved frequency a couple of times, and the kids present programs, but that's a little initiative that some of the SPARC members help with. And again, and I won't lay claim to knowing those kids, but they might just happen to be my two. So I'll leave it at that. Okay. Now, as I said before, I should be working off notes, but I'm going totally solo here. I'll go back to that. Just before I get to this little page here, we were doing things like inventories of equipment. We started our own insurance fund rather than having private insurance. WIA insured the club for liability, of course, at events, but we then decided to have our insurance fund rather than go to a company which was expensive. So that was good. We sent out questionnaires to members to work out what they wanted to do, because we were trying to get the club up and with a bit more spirit and a bit more life, and most important, some more people. We really needed more people in the club. At this stage, SPARC decided to look at running foundation classes. So I've got a phone call calling in with a request. So we discussed running foundation classes towards the end of that year, and we also got involved in getting an IRLP repeater up and running. I wasn't, but some of our members were very heavily involved in that and were successful in getting that running by the end of 2007 from memory. 2008, much the same. We continued along the same track. By this stage, we'd gone from 27 members in 2007 to 44 members, so things were looking better. 2009, again, much the same, 42 members at the end of the year. And into 2010, things really started to happen in 2010. The first thing that was worrying us with the cost of running the club was stifling. The club was forced to impose a levy on members of $75 membership rather than $45, and then a $35 equipment fee, which was a stopgap measure, which was the only thing we could do to keep things moving. We knew it was short term, and I mean, you keep doing that to a club, you're going to kill it anyway. So it got us out of the mess for a little bit, but we needed a strategy. We're still involved in local events. We got involved in the VK100 campaign that year, and our club was lucky to record the 10,000th contact. That went into the paper, so that was good publicity. And then on 30th October, this particular photo taken from another photo, very badly copied and reproduced, we had been invited by Eastbourne Primary School again to go over and help them with their car parking at their local market on a Saturday morning. But at the last moment, that was pulled because it was pointed out to them they weren't allowed to charge money for car parking on a school property. So we thought, oh, well, there's our chance to get a few funds gone. But then we got a phone call early Saturday morning from the principal, Stephen Wilkinson. He said, look, he said, still come over. We need some people with radios and vests to help park the cars. You're willing to ask for a gold coin donation. So we went over and we spent the morning. It was drizzling rain. We did a lot of PR with a lot of cars, and we came back to the club room with $200. And it doesn't sound much, but it was inspirational because the little crew that worked did a really terrific job getting that money together, and it proved something that we could make money. And then that's one of the signs we used. We sat down and we thought, okay, let's get a strategy together. Now, one of the things we started to do was to publicise the club more. The lady on the right is very significant. That is Councillor Antonella Celli. And whatever you might think of councils and local politicians, this particular lady took SPARC on board at an early date and made it her business to attend as many activities as she could. She got to know the club, and she started to assist us with ideas and fundraising ideas. And as you'll see later on, she proved very beneficial to our club. To this day, she continues to support everything we do, and I'll talk more about her later. In any case, we started to upgrade some of the functions in the radio shack there. We repainted, did a clean up, and we were starting to, I think it was more the attitude. Everybody had a really positive attitude. So let's have a look at what we did that year. We started our first Bunnings barbecues. In fact, the first year I think we did 2, and we even looked at going to Hastings to do a fundraising activity.
Hello. Hello.
Okay.
Oh, no, you're just testing.
All good? Okay. We published our first fundraising update, which was kind of a promotional thing to ourselves, to give ourselves some inspiration to keep going. We started to do foundation classes and exams, and of course the Bendigo crew, Graham and Mike and Heidi and a number of other members came down from Bendigo, and at this stage, this is where the fire station comes in handy. My officer in charge at the time heard about the shortage of space, and he said, why don't you use the training room at the fire station? He said, Sunday mornings, no one's going to be using it. It's a community asset, use it. So we got full digital, all the presentation needs that we needed, all the seating, coffee and tea making, toilet facilities, and some of the officers on deck even threw in free tours of the station for the visitors that were waiting outside. So we really had a big win. And we continued to use that facility for quite some years. It really suited us, and you could park near the radio club and walk into the fire station through the side gate. It just was wonderful. All our public displays, Kite Fest, we did an interview with Mornington Peninsula Radio. We got local press articles written. So you can see we really stepped things up. In fact, membership started to increase, and the fundraising was going so well with the barbecues and everything else that we were able to actually turn around and make donations back to local charities. And that's a nice thing. At the time, a few members said, oh, look, you know, why do we make donations? We're not a charity. And I pointed out to them, I said, well, when you're home, you make donations to charities, but you're not a charity. And they said, oh, yeah, fair enough. So they began to make small donations back to the community, which was terrific. On the next page. 2011, the idea got tossed around that maybe, just maybe, we could hold a radio fest. I've got to click forward. Oh. There's Antonella again, and police. I've got these a bit out of sync, but that's okay. Now, Lino there, and Angus and John on the left-hand side, VK3 at that stage, BJM, and John were heavily involved in, particularly Lino and his mates were involved in this trailer. They built it up from scratch. That was solar powered. Some of you have already seen it. It's a terrific piece of gear. And we'd been using it at field days, and that was partly inspirational for maybe we could do a much bigger public activity. Maybe we could run a hamfest. So there's more on that later on. We'll talk about that later on. We started to hit Facebook big time. Facebook's been really good. We started to write articles. We've got a Facebook page. All the things that you guys up here know about these days, but we were doing it also. Networking with other clubs, another big one. And it was showing us how wide the hobby was and how interested people really were. When you stay in your own little corner, you tend to forget there are lots of other clubs out there. It's rather strange. We have this hobby where we communicate and we don't talk to the next club. We were good friends with Frankston Amateur Radio Club and Moorabbin and Eastern Mountain and all those clubs, but on a kind of an arm's reach or arm's length contact basis. We didn't really do much with them. So we started to look at other clubs and networking. We'll go into 2012. All right, now the Radio Fest was on for sure. We had a first international visitor from America. He arrived at the meeting one day thinking he was coming to the Radio Fest. He missed it by 18 months, but we told him that he had achieved something that most of our other members hadn't managed, and that was getting to a training meeting. So he was very happy with that. I'm a bit torn between whether to add this now or add it later, but I'll say this now about the Radio Fest. We knew from the early stages with our limited membership, we needed all hands on deck, and we had some problems. We needed to do things like catering. We didn't think we could do that. Every member was required to participate. That was a condition. Tasks were allocated. We had major advertising campaigns. We did posters. We bombed Facebook like a rifle range, hit all the other clubs. We arranged for guests and speakers and companies. And again, I'll touch on this later, but people often say, oh, you know, the big companies, they won't come to Radio Fests anymore. Well, they won't if you don't ask them. And amazingly, when we asked the companies, they nearly all said yes. One or two had good reasons for not coming, but as you'll see later, they all agreed to come and help. So there's no room for negativity. We just struck straight into it and we wouldn't take no for an answer. What do they say? Build it and they will come. And they did. And by the way, we were now running 2 foundation courses a year. I'm out of sync with the slides. So there's some of the activities we're doing outside field days. There's John and John out in the trailer. That's setting up the trailer. That's what it looks like with Lino's fantastic 2-element beam up. It's a wonderful arrangement, and we'd all have one if we could. This is at the Kite Fest. This is fully deployed and working, and it was a great draw. People would come up just to ask what we were doing there. Shots here of the fire station at Rosebud from the front. You can see the green to the right that goes across to the radio club where it used to be. It's not there anymore. There's a big new public pool being put in the last 6 months. Back of the fire station. Another back of the fire station, just to show you the facilities that are available. By the way, that tower for drying hose is a very good support for an 80-metre dipole. And we'll flick through. More publicity. This is just to demonstrate that we developed a very good link between the two services, and it was going well. Righto, this shows you, we got to the stage where the on-duty crew would come in next door and have a coffee with us and play with the gear. Some of the crews would come in, and John here showing Mark and Dave and Luke what we've got inside the club room. Mark looked very pleased with this. I think he was keen to take it home to his wife, Kate, but she wasn't so keen. And again, no shortage of officers and crew from the fire station coming over to play radio. Tell me if I'm flicking too fast. These were mostly publicity and promotional shots we took to promote events, and when we were demonstrating community links, they were quite useful. And okay, now we've got where I was aiming for, the Radio Fest. This was the the first web page that we set up, we used this particular photo, and it's still with us today on the web page. This isn't our Facebook page, this is their web page. But we had some questions to ask first about a Radio Fest while we were doing it. So we set down some ideas. And one of the things I wrote down at the time was Radio Fest feature criteria. For things that you want to put in a Radio Fest, rather than just selling things, ask some questions. So is it interesting? Is it relevant? In that, does it have any link to radio, and is it relevant as our own hobby? Has it been important in any other areas of the community that we could link with radio? Does it inspire? Is it of benefit to the club? Is it of benefit to the provider? So it's a two-way street, of course, with companies that come to and traders. That's a two-way street. We're not trying to get something out of them. It's got to be something in it for both parties. Does it provide a wow factor? We'll show you that a little bit later on. Would it help to draw the crowds and outsiders, and does it leave a lasting impression? So that was some of the things we were discussing at the time. Let's flick through. Okay, now I'm going to come off the notes. It's a bit hard looking at notes and talking. I can talk well enough without notes. Now, this is one of our first meetings getting ready for the Radio Fest. We've got the signs made up. Those signs are all second-hand frames. One of our members, John ZUM, is an avid, he calls himself a tip rat. I prefer to call him an opportunist. And he found a whole range of metal frames, so we made some signs up. This is one of our first planning meetings. Lots of biscuits and coffee were consumed. Very small crew doing a lot of work. Howard on the left. Neil, top left-hand corner in the green. I think that's Tony. Yeah, Tony. And Richard, VK3RR. Then on to Bob Crowell. And in the bottom corner there, I think that's John Ross, our vice president or former president at the time. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We had a major problem. We had no venue. We had all the ideas. We had the inspiration, the motivation, and we had timelines, but we had no venues. We went to the local Shire Council and tried to secure the hall on the foreshore, but they wanted too much. There was no way we could afford it. And we were trying to work out how we could stage a Radio Fest on a small scale. And then out of the blue, my kids' principal, Stephen Wilkinson, again, you might remember I spoke about him earlier with the car park and the parking. He piped up and said, well, why don't you use the primary school auditorium, our classrooms and the grounds? You could do the show in the auditorium, you could do the forums that you plan to have in the classrooms, and you could have outside displays and things in the grounds. Well, obviously, we jumped on it. It was just wonderful. And those of you who have been down know what a terrific venue it is. It's got kitchens in the right-hand side there and a serving foyer at the front. Absolutely made for a Radio Fest. The stage at this end you can't see, but it's just amazing. So we're up and running. Now, this is planning and setting up for our very first one in November 2012. It's very modest. Have a look, there's only a small number of tables, not too many chairs, very widely spaced. A lot of work. Neil in the top corner there did a lot of the extra wiring we needed to get leads and power through. We'd taken on a catering crew from our own club. We were going to do the catering ourselves. Didn't work out quite so well. A lot of work involved, and it meant we detracted from the work available to be done for the Radio Fest, but that's another story. So here we go, getting ready for the first one. Got some gear in already. This is the early morning setting up, as traders starting to set up in the morning, and just starting to take shape. Richard, now, we established a call-in station. You've got to have a call-in station. If you're going to do a Radio Fest, you've got to have a call-in station. So the local repeater, VK3 RSP on 146.675. Richard was one of our radio operators, and we had talk-ins. One of the negative aspects we struck from a few people when we'd asked them, you're going to come to Rosebud? They say, oh, it's too far. There was a perception that Rosebud was down the peninsula. It was too far. But then we pointed out, well, it's only an hour from the CBD. And I said, we've got people coming from Bendigo, and if they can come from Bendigo, well, you can surely come from the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. And then we established a talk-in station to make it even easier for people to guide them through. So strongly recommended, if Bendigo's ever thinking of a hamfest, make sure you're running your repeater station from the club rooms, from the auditorium. And John Ross also having a shot on the calling. That's the final arrangement we came to. We used to try and attach it to fences and all sorts of things, but in fact we got ourselves a little lift crane and we put the 2 metre antenna up the top and ran it in through the top of the auditorium. Worked really well. Now, at this stage, I'm going to show you Russell. After several years of running the hamfest, and as you probably gathered, the first hamfest was successful. It wasn't huge, but it made us a bit of money, and it was very nicely run, and everybody loved it. So we thought, well, we're going to do it again. After a few years, Howard, VK3QA, who is now our president, came up with the idea of running a template. So every single job that needed to be done for the hamfest was templated and written down with spots for who was doing it, what time it would have, a bit like a timeline for launching a rocket to the moon. It's pretty much the same concept. Timelines, job responsibilities, names, assistants, anything you can think of, it's in that book, and we keep adding to that and updating. So a really handy piece of gear. As well as your plan, you need the people, and the members of the club jumped on board. We've got bright vests, so they got identified. Everybody had a job. I'm not too sure what these two fine gentlemen were doing, but they looked pretty comfortable. Alan on the car parking, happy, smiling, cheerful people to guide them into the car park. John Carslake, as long as he's got his coffee, he's a happy boy. Again, every job that we had, somebody was given that job to do. And they're all happy people. And all name tags, all neatly dressed, professionalism the whole way, it really counts. Outside crew to help people setting up. And even our former president, John Ross, got a really important job holding up the toilet sign. Just kidding, if John's watching, we're sorry. Inside crews for helping the traders when they're setting up. We even had people at 6 o'clock on the setup morning going and getting food orders for the traders so that they didn't have to leave their stands. We had that arranged so that they were covered. Okay, absolute must have a good PA system. Well, again, the school had a PA system and it was fantastic. Up in the control room, above the stage floor, we had a wonderful system. The biggest bugbear is coming back on the Saturday before the show every year, and of course all the controls are set differently. So we take a photo of them now and we just set it up the same way as we had it the year before. Now, this is really vital. The first year we used the crew from the Primary School Ladies Association to do the catering. They overdid it, actually. They did it such a good job that we couldn't possibly maintain the standard they set. And subsequently, we went on to get the Rotary from Rye, and the Rotary Club do a fantastic job. Now, they keep all the profit. We don't take any of that. We benefit in that their work attracts more people to the Radio Fest. We benefit from their service. They do an amazing job of catering, a terrific range of food. And of course, if people are driving from anywhere and you want them to stay around, you've got to keep them happy and keep them fed. So again, the service is fantastic. The ladies and gents do a terrific job, and we couldn't compliment them enough on what they do. And we even provide fresh fruit. So there we go. You can see those tables there. We set up a little cafe area outside because a lot of people driving long distances don't actually meet each other very often. So we let them catch up outside, have a chat, have a drink away from the hustle and bustle inside, particularly if it's a nice sunny day. It's a great little move to put forward when you do a Radio Fest. Again, you can see how popular it is. We only have about half a dozen tables, but they're very well patronised. And again, they're never empty. Oh dear. Sorry, Mike, we got you a bit surprised. But again, inside seats so people can sit down and relax inside if the weather's not good too. Very important. Now, we decided very early on that we're going to run forums. And we decided, I think, to run 4 at spaced out times so people could get to as many as they liked. And we tried to do a forum to suit as many different tastes as we possibly could. So the first thing we had, of course, was a digital projection system running inside to put the forum schedule up along with a welcome. And then we advertised at this stage. You can see ACMA was on the board at 12:45. The Radio Fest initially ran till I think about 1. We now run it till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we still have people in the hall. And again, it's a great idea to have that up on the screen. People can see what's going on. They only got to look at the screen to see when the next forum's coming up. We still have to get on the PA and remind them, but that's okay. One of the forums over in the school classrooms, which we rearranged to set ourselves, and I'd comfortably say from that photo that these forums are very popular. And I know, Graham, you guys, you go along, and I think you're pretty happy with them.
Definitely, yeah, it's good.
It's a good initiative to have. All focused intently on what the instructor's saying. Now, if you don't know this gentleman, I suggest you hop on VK3YE's site and chase up some of his videos. Peter Parker, he's been, I think, to every Radio Fest at Rosebud since we started. He's an annual attender, and he's always immensely popular, and we love having him down there. So, of course, we couldn't do a presentation about SPARC on the Radio Fest without having Peter's big smiling face in there. Again, a look at how we fit into the classroom environment to make these forums happen. Now, how are we have time? Yeah, all right, we're not killing them. If anybody's bored and they're falling off their seats, let me know.
8 minutes, 9 minutes past 8.
Okay. One of the things we like to have at the Radio Fest is a lot of different features and things for people to look at, because there's such a wide range of tastes. If you ask somebody what amateur radio is, you ask 100 people, you'll get 100 different answers what it is. And there's no limit as far as we're concerned at the Radio Fest. We don't limit the tastes or the variety, as long as it's got a vague correlation with something to do with radio communication. We're happy to have them there, find them a table and make it happen for them. AVRS, the Australian Vintage Radio Society, have been to almost every festival we've held, and they always put on a fascinating display, and they're always very well patronised by our patrons there. So a great team of people. If you're into restored radios, you could spend hours talking to these gents. Honestly, they're fascinating, the work they do. And of course, when you can get them, they're not always available, but WIA are very good to have there. Great with their range of products and books, information, advice, and of course they promote the Radio Fest for us too. So it's great to have the WIA coming along. Now we're getting into the traders, and this is where things get interesting. As I said before, they won't come. The sky will fall. Well, they will come. Sometimes you have to ask them a few times, but if you present a good enough case and justify why you'd like to have them there, they will come. And we continue to have a very good uptake of commercial companies, large and small, from the smallest companies up to the largest traders will come and display and talk to people. And they're more than happy to. In this case, Apache Labs with their software and their software-defined radios and their programming solutions. We also have our regulars, Bruce and Chlorine from TIAB, who bring TTS systems across every year. And even after they said they were retiring, they kept coming back. So we love having them over there. And these folks, the regulars that support your Radio Fest, they are just priceless people to have. They know so many people, and they just add something to the festival that makes it just makes it click with a lot of people. And you can see Bruce and Chlorine here with their range of goods. And we also appreciate that for a trader coming to a Radio Fest, it's not a one-day thing. It is for us if you're attending as a person, but if you're a trader, it's a big commitment. You pack up a day or two before the day you transport your gear. You come and you set up early in the morning or the day before. You do the display and you talk yourself silly answering lots and lots of questions. Then you have to pack it all up and go home, and you lose another day setting it all back up again. It's a big commitment. They've got to find staffing where they've got paid people or volunteers or family. So we understand that you've got to make it attractive for them to come down and do everything you can to please your traders and make sure that it's worth their while. And again, look at some of the range of things that we have showing up every year. This is Steve from Future Systems in Western Australia. He's made a couple of trips over showing his software-defined radios. And again, he gave a presentation at a forum on his equipment. It was fantastic. And what do you say to a bloke and his company that travel across Australia to come to your Radio Fest? There really aren't words. It's just too good. Local people, and John Remington, who's a club member, and he's there every year helping the Radio Fest, helping the club, and also bringing his business. He he puts a lot more into the club than you could possibly imagine. So we love to see his family business set up and operating there, and hopefully it does well for him. And again, always happy to talk to people and answer questions. He's got a huge following on the Peninsula and the southeastern regions of Melbourne and other parts of Victoria. And his ability to sourcing equipment is just amazing. And as you can see from the smiling face, he's obviously enjoying himself. This is Ronald. Most of you know Ronald. We call him Ronald anyway. His surname is McDonald, but that's actually not his name. You're thinking drones. Well, hey, drones are radio controlled, and we know lots of people that use drone electrics in radio. So he brings his side business along most years and shows them off. G&C Comms from Cranbourne Car Sound. They'll be back again this year, and again regulars, and we love having them there. So, and you can see from the sign, it's a lot of commercial equipment there, but amazing how many people that buy this stuff that then ask questions about amateur radio. There's always a link or a possible interest there that you're not aware of. So it's worthwhile having these folks at your show. And Bunnings, you've got to use an electric drill or a battery powered drill to put up antennas. So again, they donate prizes to our competitions, which we'll tell you about shortly. So happy to have Bunnings there, we don't mind. And now we're getting serious. No, they're not selling whiskey. It's Theo and I think it's Colin, I think. I've made a number of trips when Theo was with ICOM, and a very, very professional display. Again, ask them and they will come. And not only will they come, they'll do such a fantastic show that, you know, you wonder how you would get by without them. Also, I might add, ICOM always donate very good prizes, so most thankful for that. And they bring their cars, which is even better advertising. And that was my favourite. I like that one. I don't know what my wife would say about all the antennas, but anyway. Theo on a different year, again with ICOM, and some of the gear they present, and even the professionally produced backgrounds to give it a real lift in display. Again, Theo always a very enthusiastic presenter, and that's really counts. And always smiling. And one of the prizes they were giving away. And now we're getting to the nitty-gritty of the show, and this is the second-hand pre-loved dealers who you couldn't do without. We have a strong following, as every field day or hamfest does, of people who appear an hour before the doors open. They know what they want, they're after a particular item or items, and they're ready to go. It's like a turkey shoot. And so the second-hand dealers and pre-loved dealers, absolutely heart and soul of the show. And we're very lucky now, we're getting an extremely good following of people that come and want to sell things with us. So again, we just love having them there. This is just prior to opening doors, it's still setting up. You can see the range of stuff that we're getting in there now. At the end of the little presentation, you'll get to see before and after shots of the first and the last shows and see the differences. More shots of the traders in the crowds. I'll flick through these quickly. Graham, his company, always happy to be there, and a regular every year. And he had to disappear. He left his daughter selling electronic equipment, and the question was, don't ask me any questions, I don't know. We'll just show you some general shots of the Rosebud Radio Fest. This is from a suggestion. Just remember, this is only a few years after a suggestion of could we possibly hold a Radio Fest? And have a look at what we're seeing now. I like the skill sayings on the wall. They're great. Small traders and large traders, it doesn't matter. We welcome them all. And I cannot remember this gentleman's name, but he and his wife were such happy people to have there. It was, you know, such a family type affair. Now, Julie and Joe, always regular attenders with their portable gear set up outside. And again, showing, I'm trying to remember what the satellite system that he was operating there. Lo and behold, Eastbourne Primary School put a small stand-up advertising or telling about their little FM radio station, which we'd helped to set up. So we were very happy to see that. Julie and Joe again with their portable gear and the solar panel. These are just shots. This was the club had developed a screwdriver type antenna, And there was a project table on which people could get ideas about how to build these from the guys that were building it. Lino and Richard hamming it up outside. And Lino and John, and I can't recall his name, but John's got the top hat. He's a real character. And again, one of our favourites. And my favourite picture is a gentleman looking for a book that he didn't know existed and he found it. So just goes to show. You can all relate to these photos, I'm sure. Okay. About 6 years ago, we had a call from Jeff over in Geelong. And Jeff's a retired police officer, and he was running the local Quest branch, Citizens Radio Emergency Service Teams, and inquired as to whether or not they would be allowed to exhibit their display, their vehicle and communications equipment at the Radio Fest, to which we said, of course you are. So they, on the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, drove to the ferry at Queenscliff, put the truck on the ferry, came across the bay, came off at Sorrento, drove up to the Radio Fest, and they spent the day showing people how Quest operate with their mobile vehicle and the kind of gear they were using. And that club, I might add, are real battlers. They really struggle along to keep the show going, but they do keep the system up and running. We were more than happy to have them at the show. And again, had a very keen following of people that wanted to hop inside the van and see how they work. And Greg, I think that is. Now, local involvement. This is the forward operations vehicle as run by the Peninsula group of fire brigades. That's the organisation which looks after the groups of local fire brigades. They team them up into clusters, and this is a group facility. And this is one of the vehicles I used to train people on at the fire station. So Mark and Ruth here showing off the comms, the forward operations vehicle, which they brought along and displayed and they've brought it every year. So again, it adds something to the show to have these kinds of displays and exhibits. Rosebud staff, heavy pumper, as Senior Station Officer Neil Chapalis. Again, they attend on their working day and do a display for the people outside, and it's very well received, as you can see. This is where having features is useful. Again, the FAV crew on another day. Little boys in fire trucks, you can't pull them apart. It adds something to the day. Wyson always make a good show, and always Paul Whittaker, VK3DPW, who always puts on a great effort with his data systems, in which he sends emails and maps and pictures over HF radio. I've only got a reminder that ACMA have been down on many occasions and given talks, and they always pack the forum rooms. The latest in ACMA regulations also give us a lot of interesting bust stories, which are always well received. But if you're going to do a Radio Fest, definitely invite ACMA. Okay, this gentleman is Glenn Philp, and he's an air attack supervisor. Why is he pointing to the sky? Remember I mentioned the wow factor. We decided in 2015 it would be nice to have something different, some feature to make the show stand out from all the others. So I made an approach to our air wing through work and said, what's the chance of getting a helicopter? And the answer was pretty good, actually. In fact, we've got a brand new helicopter, Firebird 300. It's a brand new turbine. It's worth X million dollars, and we'd be happy to fly it down, provided you can do the planning for us and get us some information about departure lanes and approach lanes, and organise emergency services to be on standby for the landing and takeoff, and we'll send a crew. So this is actually on the day of the landing. Glenn arrived early and he worked out with the crew where the emergency services would need to be, where the club members would need to be, what time the helicopter would make its approach and land. This is after about 12 months of planning, a lot of meetings involved. If a helicopter is going to land for an emergency, it just doesn't. But when you want to plan them for an event, there's a lot to do to make sure that it all comes off on the day. And of course, it's got to go through CASA, and it's got to go through the Emergency Management Victoria, in this case, and it's got to go through the air attack wing. So you've got to get your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Lo and behold, at I think it was 10:30, Firebird 300 appeared over the trees, made the approach. And you can see we've got a fiery on the left and one of the club members on the right there, just out on the cordon. Touchdown. Beautiful day. Couldn't have dreamed of a better situation. John Katsakunis was the supervisor, came out and spoke to the assembled crowd. Now, one of the problems that we needed to deal with was that we were going to, at 10:30, drag everybody out from the forum, out from the auditorium, and were the traders going to be happy? As it turned out, it worked out really well. I had thought that the Firebird would stay on the ground for about 10 to 15 minutes. They stayed on the ground for 2.5 hours and talked to everybody. Gave us so much of their time, it was fantastic. So people would come out when they'd finished buying and selling and have a look at the chopper and go back in again. Then they opened the doors and said, come up and have a look. And the crew was like that pretty much for 2 hours. There was always a group of people out there looking at the helicopter and having a guided tour. It's something different. A lot of people don't get to see this stuff up close, particularly a brand new chopper. That camera under the front was worth over $1 million. It's a forward-looking infrared fire tracking camera. And again, the crew took plenty of time explaining how that worked. Allowed people to look inside at the gear, the cockpit. And of course, even our local volunteer fire crew that showed up to help us with the emergency management planning for that, they took a great interest in it too. And there's our inspiration. Little boy gets a chance to have a close look at a new helicopter. It's not to be laughed at. Yeah, I look pretty happy there, don't I? And it all come off after about a year of planning. And then departure, and they were away back to Moorabbin again. Oops, try again. Okay, on we go. Prize giving, got to have prize giving. Again, ICOM and our major prize givers look after us very well. Over the years, we've had some really good prizes. Now, this is what you want to see. The whole room stopped and looking at 12 o'clock waiting for the prize drawers. Have we got the tickets we need? John, I'm not sure whether he's giving that prize away or he's threatening to throw it. That's some of our happy prize winners. ICOM prize, antenna. They all look pretty happy. Oh!
Rigged.
Rigged.
Redraw.
There we go. I think you want an antenna, Graham.
Yeah.
Outside displays a must-have if the weather's good. And we're always lucky in November. There you go again, buying stuff.
Just had Kay there collecting a prize. She is now silent key.
I'm sorry to hear that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, no, well, it's nice to see it actually, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, sorry. No. And again, Antonella Celli, the councillor, attends as many radio fests as she can, which we really appreciate. That's to us, that's local community involvement. And of course, she's got to know Mike and Graham quite well too, through her efforts to assist Bendigo with their moves to get a clubhouse. Cole and Graham. Now.
And Ian Gillard in the background.
Sorry?
And that was Ian Gillard in the background.
Okay, I'll have to label that. Now, from memory, I think this is the first show we did. And that's 2015. Do you notice the difference? The first show was enough to be a success. By 2015, we were packed from 9 o'clock through till 2 o'clock in the afternoon and very happy about it. That's what we like to see. Big crowd, everybody looking, people buying, projects up, things happening all the time. That was one stage I labelled that the little boy was telling his father that antenna had 15 dB forward gain. Car park was full with our attendants there all the time. And that was after one of the radio fests. That's the synergistic beer drinking competition, although they've only got soft drink there, according to the photo. That's a very relieved crew after another successful radio fest. You can tell from the smiles, all happy. And my take on it, well, I've already showed you the manual. And yes, they do come in handy. So there you go.
This is intermission.
Intermission.
First part.
Okay. Are you all still awake? I can see movement. Okay.
Yes, yeah, I am. And I was going to make a couple of comments, extra ones, and I thought, no, shut up.
That's all right, Heidi.
The guy that you said earlier on that was with John and Lino, his name was Steve.
Steve.
His
Okay.
partner is Donna. I think
Okay.
they're Waterbull or something, and they're backwards and forwards like a yo-yo.
You often recognise the faces, but I can't put names to faces. So.
Yeah, no, I had to think there for you'd gone on about 3 slides before it came to me.
That's all right.
How many?
Radio operators, we're not accustomed to putting names to faces.
Yeah, that's good. That sounds like a good enough excuse to me.
Oh, that was fabulous, Mark. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all right.
And now we're going to
You definitely set the bar very high for us. There you go.
Coffee time.
Operation Backstop.
The thing with setting the bar is that our first aim was just to have a radio fest. We couldn't possibly have imagined that at this stage of the game we have a radio fest where people now say, oh yeah, Rosebud's on in November. It's a fixture on the calendar, and people always compliment us when they come down, and we love that. But the other thing too is it enables us now to give back to other clubs that have helped us to help them when they want a hand. So we can now say, look, we've learnt this, or we've done this way, or this is what we've discovered, this is what works and this is what doesn't work. So we've kind of we've made a template, if you like. So we're more than willing to help anybody if they want to do it. One of the things that concerns me occasionally is the hint that there might be competition between some clubs and radio fests. And I'd rather see every radio fest complementing and building on the next one, so that we're all building for the hobby. And for every successful radio fest, that's another group of happy people in the hobby. Okay, now we're going to go on to Operation Backstop. Following the 2009 Black Saturday fires, which I'm sure you all recall, on top of the horrific damage and the death toll, this was all underpinned by some colossal failures in infrastructure, communications, electricity supplies, water supplies. It really pulled the rug out from under a lot of people's feet who really relied on the infrastructure we had, mobile phones, power, water, that sort of thing. And the question was asked at Rosebud one day, what could we as rank and file amateur radio operators have done to have helped? Could we have been useful in any way? Or could we organise ourselves so that we might be useful in the future? Now, this was not to detract or to differentiate from the work that Wyson do. Wyson are an established organisation, very highly trained, doing work at a very high level, linking almost strategic work, linking emergency services together and providing other high-level community communication needs in times of disaster and distress. We were thinking on a more compact local scale, what could we as operators do in a local sense to help our communities, assuming Wyson crews would be away and already established and working and committed, what could we do in our home patch to help? So the first thing we thought we'd do is try and establish what capability we actually had if everything fell through. So we put together a thing initially called Operation Worst Case, but we changed that to Operation Backstop because it just sounded better. We just wanted to provide some kind of safety guard in the community that gave us a level of communication that, oh, thanks, Graham. Vodka?
Yep, gin.
Gin. That allowed us to use what we had in the best possible way for the benefit of the community. So we started to think about Operation Backstop. Whoops. This is a look at a satellite view of the Black Saturday fires from very, very high up in the atmosphere. And you can see the vast swathe of black through the ranges there where the fires were burning at Marysville. It was a terrible situation. But fortunately, the Mornington Peninsula wasn't touched at that stage. These are some of the scenes that inspired us or frightened us from Black Saturday. That one's at Rosebud. That's the 2008 freeway fire, which was horrific. That's at Macrae a few years ago. On the freeway reserve, that fire was intense. It overran houses and it burnt part of the famous nursery and historic house at, I can't think of the name of it now. Isn't that terrible? I'm getting old. Famous old structure there. So there's just a reminder of Black Saturday, the devastation, as opposed to the beautiful environment we lived in. Now let's look at what would happen for a club that decided to test its capabilities with little to no notice. Let's have a look at some of the topography of the Mornington Peninsula. This is on one of the ocean beaches near Cape Schanck. This is out near, looking across at Point Nepean, I think that is. Again, my work location, it's horrific. Just another bad day on the beach. That's Mount Martha in the distance. This is looking back towards the approach to Arthur's Seat, just off the coast of Rosebud and Macrae. This is looking from the top of Arthur's Seat. You can see the transmission towers on the right. The hour repeater is located a little bit further down near that grey building on top of the hill. That's looking back towards Frankston, Mount Martha, Mornington, along through Dramana at the bottom there. That black patch you see is actually not a bushfire. That was a strategic burn put in by DELP to remove what was perceived to be a very nasty situation should a fire come up that slope. That's all regenerated now. Another view from Arthur's Seat back down towards Dramana and Safety Beach. Look at the topography, flat undulating up to hilly. Looking from Dramana back up towards Arthur's Seat, back looking to the south or the southwest. And another one of those terrible scenes. Heavy, thick forested bushlands, very difficult to access. A scene looking across Murray's Lookout on top of Arthur's Seat, or halfway up Arthur's Seat. Walking tracks near Cape Schanck, almost impossible to get vehicles into. Very, very difficult to provide communication. This is to demonstrate that our local fire and emergency services treat the area with a great amount of respect and spend a lot of time getting to know the district and learning about access points and water supplies and things like that. It's crucial. Some of the equipment that's used in the area, the various services that we have working down there. This is a, sorry, can I go back on that? How do I go back? There we go.
Yeah, right.
A 3.4C 3,000 litre four-wheel drive tanker. That's Dramana Volunteer Fire Brigade. We also are very fortunate these days, and at the moment the fire danger period is declared. If we get an outbreak of rural or non-structure fire, as we call it, we have an immediate launch from Moorabbin. One of these beasties gets up off the pad at Moorabbin and is heading straight down to our location should it be required to do a water drop. Of course, Ambulance Victoria, we work very closely with their paramedics. And of course, our faithful crews from the State Emergency Service, and every one of these teams is required to deal with what is sometimes a very difficult environment to handle emergencies in. Not forgetting, of course, our boys and girls now in black, used to be in blue. Why have I got that there? Well, that's simple. Mornington Peninsula Shire provide fire and emergency provisions in respect to their operations and control rooms, their fire prevention officers, their promotion of fire and emergency management on the peninsula, and they're a great resource to have around. We work very closely with them too. Vehicle you can see here now is what I showed you before, the forward operation vehicle. Here it is at an operation in Rosebud. and setting up to link ground crews via radio back to Vic Fire in Melbourne. It was an exercise, I believe, and we set up the portable antenna and used that vehicle for an exercise. But it gives you an idea of what it can do. It can travel anywhere. So quite mobile. Another scene of the FOV set up and working with the little mast VHF and a range of various radio systems, running at this stage off a portable generator, which is out of picture to the left. And another photo of just how close in some of these vehicles can get to the actual action when they're working. In this case, very close. One of the main resources, also there are some group radio rooms that we can use for provisional communications, as well as the Vic Fire dispatch service that mostly usually on a separate channel and often by a separate resource. And again. Okay, here we go looking at the peninsula again, but this time it's a topographical look. We're looking at virtually a 2D relief map, and you can see that the chain of hills that run from just south of Frankston around the Summers area, Balcombe, and down towards the tip at Cape Shank. That's very difficult countryside to work in. It's very hilly and very remote. It flattens out towards the tip of the peninsula and along the coastal areas, but it's quite challenging to work in. And it's very resource heavy in terms of getting stuff in and out. It makes it very difficult. So now we get to the map that we prepared for our crews who we were going to involve in a little exercise. So the exercise by communications to link Rosebud, which you can see arrowed there off the beach. Rosebud would be the control point, with all the other fire stations on the peninsula. Mount Martha to the northeast, Dramana to the northeast, below Arthur's Seat, back to Main Ridge, right in the middle of the hills and the valleys, and over the other side to Flinders, which is always a challenge because of the blockations. Right down around towards the sweep of the bay to the west, and then on to Sorrento, around towards the tip. So the challenge would be to imagine a station to all these stations just to provide basic communication between and to the other stations. It was not designed to give high-level communications. It was just to provide a link to allow the pass communication. So I have here the briefing. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to give you a quick look at the scenario. Aim and exercise capability for SPARC members to establish and operate in a fixed time frame effective self-contained communication points during times of emergency on the Mornington Peninsula. Scenario, late January, bushfires burning for 3 days and spread across central northern Victoria. Firefighting and support services are boosted by strike teams from metropolitan, southern and southwestern Victoria. Further resources from New South Wales being staged at Echuca prior to deployment to the worsted areas. Property losses significant, unconfirmed reports of fatalities filtering into incident control centres. This is very similar to what we faced on the Black Saturday scenario. Late in the day, CFO brigades respond to numerous outbreaks sparked by lightning in the Mallee, Wimmera and Western District, with high winds accompanying a cool change crossing the border from South Australia, which will make things worse. Firefighters are now told not to expect any support from South Australian units, as most of these services are tackling major outbreaks in the Western, Northern and Southeastern districts around Adelaide. So this is a worst case scenario. In the east of Victoria, forest fires burn in dense forest near Cann River, over the border and up as far as Maroomula. Surprise, surprise, what did we see last year? Another blaze is commencing at Tangil, running south to the power generation units in the Latrobe Valley. The coal mining operations and power stations. And guess what? In 2014, that's exactly what happened. DELP are now, or DSA as they were then, are now fully committed, and the State Emergency Coordinator has requested international teams be summoned. This will take several days to achieve. I'm going to move down the track a bit past all the disaster and say that emergency service communication centres at Burwood and Melbourne's East and at St Mount Helen near Ballarat switched to their emergency power supply. Their functions are now seriously curtailed. Pager systems providing emergency dispatch information are unable to cope with the volume of traffic. Their messages backlog is up to hours. Hardline and cellular telephone services begin to shut down, as in 2009, under strain from overuse and systemic power failures. Many telephone exchanges are already down as a result of multiple line failures due to fire and wind. On the Mornington Peninsula, no fires are yet reported, but resources, including the group's Forward Ops vehicle and crews, have been sent to other areas, leaving a depleted district with trucks and firefighters away. To further exacerbate the situation, Peninsula-based YSM teams have gone to leaving the district without any fallback comms facilities. So, here we go. At 0800 hours, the oncoming day shift duty officer for Rosebud Fire District is briefed. Previously mentioned facts, and faced with a total loss of communications between Vic Fire and the Peninsula, he contacts the president of the Southern Peninsula Amateur Radio Club. He's now tasked with the job: allocate and dispatch SPARC members to specified fire stations around the group. They're to establish a radio link or links from each fire station property back to Rosebud. Crews should decide which bands and frequencies and modes they believe will offer the best prospects of maintaining reliable antenna and equipment in the Rosebud fire station for each different band, mode, frequency. They will need to supply a corresponding receiving facility at Rosebud. Installations should be self-powered, either battery generator or other portable sources, and not connected to the service mains. If desired, the SPARC club rooms next to the fire station may be employed in the link, but all communications must ultimately be received and transmitted through the Rosebud fire station property. Crews are advised to take whatever others take. Okay, that's a scenario. I've got multiple pages to use them. I'm just going to, off the top of my head, explain what happened.
8:45.
8:45. So John Ross, our sector commander, as we named him, set himself up in the training room of the fire station next to the fire station duty officer with a VHF portable, linking himself to the crew meters away. The other members of the club then proceeded out to the various locations to pre-dispatch themselves to various fire stations. The lesser able crews with the lower power went to the closer fire stations or ones down low on the beach. Other stations went out with HF gear. I'm going to really shorten this down. I could talk for hours, but I won't. Suffice to say that within 55 minutes, we had every fire station on the peninsula on the air, communicating back to Rosebud Fire Station, successfully passing messages and information backwards and forwards, along with, I think Paul's data link signal system was up and running for maps and emails. There was one or two issues. Flinders was hard to do because of the topography, but the crew put in a HF system and got that working very quickly. Mount Martha is down in amongst valleys and ridges, and that took a little bit of work, but the boys eventually got their hand on HF, so we had that all linked. Now I'm going to cut this really short. The exercise was so successful and generated so much comment that it made it to Mornington Peninsula Shire. They came out, we wrote them a review, a summary of what happened and the facilities available. They wrote that into their local emergency system so it could be used if required. And it still to this day remains. So we're keen to practice that system from time to time, make sure we can do it. There's another upshot from that exercise. And that is the confidence boost it gave the club. This is some of the gear that we used on the day. I'll look at the facilities, the club room, very modest. We were almost high-fiving at the end of that exercise. We were so pleased with how it went. And the publicity that we got from various outlets and the comments generated through the emergency services and, of course, through the Mornington Peninsula Shire were just priceless. We had no idea how that little exercise would have such a leverage effect. You see John working hard there, and Paul with his system working. And I think that's it. As I said, I could talk for hours. I've gone over time, I believe. That's just a habit I have. I've got plenty of paperwork if you would like to have a close look at what happened and how we did it, but I just hurried that through at the end so that you knew what would happen. But you saw the outcome. Any club could do this. We did that within the limits of our legal abilities. We didn't infringe on any other services. We worked within our own bands and our own power limits. And we also understood our limitations and our capabilities. So It was just to see what we could do, and by golly, you'd be amazed. So I've cut myself short, but I think I've been talking long enough, Graham. So,
yeah. So maybe we might open it up for questions now. People can unmute their microphones and ask any questions.
Mark, I understand that since Operation Backstop was undertaken, the communications for emergency services has been upgraded. Has that changed the prospective role that amateur radio might have in those sort of circumstances?
Oh, thanks. No, I don't believe so. The upgrades that take place are generally centred on the satellite links, the digital paging services and the various communications networks, phone services. Nothing could ever really remove the risk of total power and communications failure from the infrastructure networks that we have. We saw on the day in 2009 how pager services went down, if not from power failure, they went down because of sheer overuse. The Peninsula has, at that time of year, tens of thousands of people. The services get overrun. So even in these days of facilities available, nothing seems to detract the ability or detract the value of an independently operated, totally self-contained communication system with ability to use different powers. And of course, with the willing participants, i.e. the amateur radio operators, prepared to go out and get it running. It's just a resource that it's impossible to go past.
Do the operators maintain that gear on a continuous basis, or does it drop back to being their amateur radio equipment outside of emergency periods?
Thanks, Mike. The gear they use is just the gear they use at home. One or two members do have portable kits made up and ready to go. But as we're not an established emergency service per se, there's no recommendation or word on people to be prepared, as the Scouts would put it. Pardon me. It's very much a matter of on the day. You could call that a failing, but by and large, I find that at any one time I could get, particularly now that SPARC, by the way, has nearly 80 members. We only had about 25 active members in those days. So given the level of membership now and the level of experimentation, I'm fairly confident that at any given time of day or year, we could still get a similar or even a larger crew and a bigger supply of equipment to do that job. I see your point. And it's probably worth encouraging people to maintain equipment ready to go. But at the end of the day, it's probably hard. We couldn't police it. It's nothing, we can't force people to do it. We can only encourage people. And to that end, we're now looking at talking about perhaps rejuvenating and doing another version of Operation Backstop sometime down the track just to see how we go.
I noticed in your screed that you said that individual members would be allowed to choose the bands that they would use in their own particular area. What led to that decision as opposed to Rosebud allocating frequencies out to different operators?
We did allocate one or two VHF channels as constants. They were default channels. But we also worked out some HF frequencies, recommended HF frequencies that we would listen on or use from the clubhouse. The clubhouse was running off a portable generator supply that Neil put in, and that was done on the day. He hooked that up from the moment he got the call. He went in and hooked up the generator, and then they got the various antennas and systems running from the clubhouse and allocated what frequencies they'd be listening on. So they were clubhouse frequencies that they'd be listening to, and they passed that list on to the operators. But it was up to the operators to decide once they got where they were, which one of those bands, if you like, that they chose to use. So they had definite meeting frequencies, but they could use any band they liked as long as there was a receiving facility back at Rosebud.
Thank you.
I've recently acquired a 45 metre TV repeater tower that we can use for bending a lot in the area. is there any limitations on the height that the HF and VHF antennas can go on towers? Any restrictions?
For a private operator, Ian, I think it comes down to whatever your local shire stipulates. And given that some shires will allow certain heights with a building permit or a particular structural permit, and other conditions which might relate to neighbours or visual disturbance and things like that. So it's very much up to the owner-operator as to what they've got installed at their home. Living in Rosebud, I could only dream of having a 45-metre tower. I don't think the Shire would be too happy about that, but if you can get that and get it up and allocate that as a resource for those sorts of operations, that's fantastic. But I think it just comes down to what you're trying to do.
TV, ex-Southern Cross TV repeater tower. It's already on site, already got its own power, and out in the bush at Graduate, up near Quambatook. So the tower and all that legal side, everything, the construction, everything's all there. So there's no limitation on an existing tower on how high we could put an antenna on that.
No, I don't believe so, Ian. I think if it's already established and it's approved and you've got it and it's available for you to use, I'll be up there like a squirrel.
Right, thanks.
Okay.
With the coax in hand.
Sorry?
With the coax in hand.
If I could find a squirrel that can use a crimper, yes.
We're clever in the country.
Bill and I know a couple of tower riggers. So.
I've actually got my towers at White Hills, ex-CFA freestanding towers. So one's a 17 and one's a 12. I'm pretty happy with those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, very good, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, very good indeed.
Thanks for listening.
Will you keep us apprised of any developments or a new exercise if it comes about?
Yeah, for sure. We're more than happy to. We catch up with Graham and Mike and Heidi and Neil on a regular basis, so that's not an issue. And of course, you guys come down. A lot of you guys come down at November to the fest, so we see you there too. So that's all good. But yeah. And I'd also take in mind Lee, VK3FLJD there at Rosebud. He's, I wouldn't say a newcomer, but he's relatively newer than people that were around for Operation Backstop. So he might have heard some things tonight that he wasn't aware of, and things that he might want to ask me about down the track, because I know Lee is very keen, and I reckon he'd be my first port of call if we're going to set up another exercise. I've just told you in, Lee. He's not saying anything. So he might have gone. Yeah, oh no, he's still there. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your attendance and listening tonight. I really appreciate the chance to talk about SPARC. And as I was going to wrap up by saying, SPARC now have 80 members and new club rooms, thanks to Antonella and her work. And club's very progressive and very positive, and also very keen to work with BARC. We're still hoping to get a social activity once all these conditions get lifted. So I reckon it's Hanging Rock or something like that. We'll organise something. Okay, I'll hand it back to Graham, and thanks for listening.
Actually, Mark,
Hire a bus for the hamfest this year.
We've got bus parking, no problem at all.
Don's got a question. Donald's got a question.
Oh, Don.
No? Oh, just thumbs up. Sorry, mate.
Okay.
but if I had another question, Mark, in relation to your political arm, if I can call it that. Antonella appears to have featured very prominently. I was wondering who sought out whom in that relationship. Did she come to you, or did you go to her, or did it just kind of happen by accident?
It just kind of happened, I think. We met her at one function and explained what the radio club was and what it did, and she took great interest in it. And I've also been, look, it's important to point something out, and it's an illustration. Some years ago, I think around 2016, 15, 16, the career staff firefighters took on the role of emergency management, emergency medical response, which is heart attacks, critical trauma, breathing difficulties, those sorts of things. So we respond in the pumper, and we assist, or usually often arrive before AV crews because we're more local and available. They're kept busy all the day. And we initiate CPR or whatever measures we need to take. When we first set that up, I held a little session at the fire station on a day shift where I invited local representatives to come down and look at what, there was a lot of questions from the community who didn't understand the system, and we wanted to make it perfectly clear. And one of the ways to do that was to give it to the local shire councillors and say, this is what we're doing, this is how it works. The system's been working with the Metropolitan Fire Brigade since 1992. We're now coming on board in the CFA with your career staff. And there, by the way, there are 1 or 2 volunteer stations around the state that do this too, I might add. So it would be beneficial if you come to the station and we'll show you how it works, what we carry on the trucks, what the training is, how the crews operate. I sent out quite a range of invitations. There are only 3 takers, and Antonella was the most enthusiastic of those, and she's maintained that to this day. Whenever there's a development at the fire station or something happening, she'll contact us and we'll explain it, demonstrate. Same with the radio club. And it's not just lip service we've found with Antonella. She genuinely is interested. She comes down, she knows many of the members, she supports what the club does, always offers to help. And in fact, in this case, on hearing that Bendigo needed a little bit of a hand, she penned an email and made some phone calls. So, which is certainly not her responsibility, but she took it on herself anyway, which we appreciated. So, yeah, just very pleased with the representation.
Right, it sounds like she's got some sort of personal motivation in there somewhere that she's prepared to be proactive like that off her own bat. That's really good.
Very much so, yeah.
So I might stop the recording now before we continue with some chit chat. So I'll stop the recording now. And thank you, Mark. That was very good.
Thanks for listening.